Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. What we're going to do here, at least in the beginning here, is kind of a jump ball sort of thing. The theme of this week's gathering here is pay attention. And in the back of my mind, as we've heard various people talking on this particular theme, in the back of my mind, they're kept rotating back there. Pay attention to what? Exactly. Because, attention, we're hearing an awful lot about attention these days and how many people want it and how many different ways they have going about getting it, whether we want to give it to them or not. So yeah, paying attention seems like a good idea, but it seems also particularly fraught these days. Especially for writers too, because what do we exactly do? We're writers, but we're also citizens, and we wake up in the morning, and many of us make the mistake of reading the Times first. And partly we do so because we want to pay attention. We want to know what's going on in the world, and we want to be good citizens. And to the extent that we can, we want to act accordingly. So yes, pay attention. Pay attention to the news. Pay attention to what's going on. There's a role for us as citizens out there. So pay attention. The problem for me anyway as a writer, though, is that if I'm paying attention to all of that, that requires us to enter a world of tremendous noise out there. This is a very noisy time that we're living through. I suppose it could be said that all times are noisy. This one seems particularly noisy. And that's a problem for the artist, I think, because the one thing that it seems to me that art has always demanded from the very, very beginning, just go back as far as you want to go, what art has always demanded is quiet. If not silence, at least quiet. So how do we then, and so the extent that we bury ourselves in the noise, are we kind of, if we're acting on that responsibility, are we then kind of ignoring that other responsibility that we have as artists? I really enjoyed what Marlon said earlier about the importance of books. Everybody knows how important books are because in a fascist regime, the poets are the first ones that they come for. So we know that that's true as well. So how do we align? I guess that's the question here: is as citizens, how do we align our responsibility with citizens that requires us to bury ourselves in the noise with our responsibilities to our art with a capital A? How does the artist pay those necessary dues too? And we'll open the question to you too in the audience at some point to say, what do you think our responsibilities are? Which would you rather have us paying attention to? It doesn't mean we have to choose one to the exclusion of the other, but how in the world do we balance those various obligations that at times just don't seem to align very well? We don't want to, on the one hand, we don't want to fiddle while Rome burns, but on the other, I remember on my last book tour with Ann Patchett, we just decided on a mantra. How do you behave? How do you act in the world that we presently live in? And the mantra that we came up with was, if it mattered before, it still does. If it doesn't now, it never did.
Okay.
So let's go. Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
I think when you're starting out as a writer, you have to figure out how you're going to pay attention. And if you want to be a novelist, one of the things you have to do is eavesdrop and observe. And so that means that you have to pick a subject that you want to write about, and then you have to go to wherever it is that you think the heart of that subject is. And you have to keep your eyes open and your ears open and listen. And that will tell you what direction you're going in. I mean, when I wrote 1,000 Acres, I was interested in farming. I said this the other day, but maybe some of you didn't hear it. I called my agent and I said I was going to write a book about my next book about farming, and she said, "Farming? Nobody cares about farming." And I said, "Well, I don't care." And I also knew that I was going to rewrite King Lear so that Goneril and Reagan got their voice.
Yeah.
So I knew that the reason that I was writing 1,000 Acres was to expose what was going on in farming in Iowa, because Iowa was kind of the farming center of the Midwest, at least. And I also wanted to explore the minds of the female characters rather than King Lear himself, who in 1,000 Acres is named Larry. But that taught me that I had to have a reason to write every book. And the reasons could be different, but they had to have a purpose. And so, you know, when I was writing books about horse racing, or the one I wrote about horse racing, which was Horse Heaven.
I blank on my titles too sometimes.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
Who knows?
I wanted to write about the possibilities of being honest in horse racing and contrasting yourself with the horse trainers who were very cruel to their horses.
Yeah.
And I think every novelist hopes that the book that they write will cause some kind of change. If you get older, as I've done, you realize that that's not likely.
Yeah.
It's not like things were when Charles Dickens was writing, where people paid so much attention to his work that they got much more interested in the world around them.
It has changed a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. But that's okay. You just have to, it has to keep you going.
Yeah.
It has to give you a purpose. When I wrote 13 Ways of Looking at the Novel, I constructed this little pyramid of the parts of the novel. And there are 4 layers, and at the bottom of the pyramid is language, and the language has to be understandable. That's the door. And then the second layer up is plot and character. And that has to be understandable. And that's why I like murder mysteries, because the mystery writer often makes you understand the person who actually committed the murder and what it felt like to the person who was murdered, and also to the people who were related to that person. And then layer 3 is setting and theme. And that's really important, because if you're walking around looking at a particular setting, the story cannot work in the way it would if it were in a different setting.
Right.
And then so you have to be aware of what's going on in that spot. You have to know that you would be writing the book differently, let's say if you were in California rather than North Carolina. And that the themes that you would have would also vary. And then at the tip top is complexity. And complexity is the hard one to understand, because there has to be some complexity in every book. But if there's too much complexity in any of the lower areas, then the reader will toss it. So there are many great books who have complex language, like Ulysses, for example.
Yeah.
But there's so many readers who've tried to read Ulysses and didn't understand a word. Yeah. And so you have to think about, okay, what's going to be complex, what's going to be easy? Are the characters going to be easy to understand, or are they going to be more complicated?
Yeah.
And I think that pyramid is what's kept me going. You know, there are a lot of things that I tried in various books, didn't quite work. I went on and tried them again. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of writers, it's just how different each one is always going to be as soon as you decide where, who, and how you're going to talk about it.
Listening to you talk, I'm envious of what you're describing there, because it really sounds like you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if if you're looking at it through the other end of the telescope now that you've written the book and you go back and you think to yourself, what did I know and when did I know it? Or are you really that smart about what you're doing? Because I don't think I know nearly as much when I begin a book as you seem to know.
Well, I have to say that when I wrote 13 Ways of Looking at the Novel, which I wrote around in the early 20th century, around the time of where the buildings were knocked down in New York, and everybody was
9/11.
scared to say that again.
9/11.
Yeah.
9/11.
Yeah.
A lot of writers after 9/11 said, "Ugh, what I'm writing is just meaningless."
Yeah.
And I decided that I was going to put aside what I was writing and read as many novels as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started with the first one. I can't remember what it was, but it was from about the year 1000. So the first lengthy story. Mm-hmm. And I read 130 novels, including all of Proust.
Wow. Yeah.
Which I like. You know, I didn't expect to like it. It took me a whole summer, but so I read all of those. And I learned so much from reading these novels that had been going on for, 1,000 years, that prodded me to know more about what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And I was really grateful for that. And I did put 2 chapters in that book called A Novel of Your Own Part 1 and A Novel of Your Own Part 2.
Yeah.
And Part 1 is about your rough draft. And in it I said, every rough draft is perfect because it never existed before. Mm-hmm. But then you put it away, you come back, you read through it, and you get many more ideas. You forget about it. You have to forget about it. You can't contemplate it until you come back to it.
Well, you're saying rough draft as if, when you start a book, do you write a rough draft all the way from start to finish?
Yeah.
Because I find, there again, I can't get past 100 pages before I realize I've made a terrible mistake and have to start again. Yeah. So when my rough draft, it never gets there from start to finish.
Well, usually almost always I have a plan. And the plan
that might explain it right there.
The plan is always different. The plan is always different. Like with 1,000 Acres, my plan was to follow King Lear as closely as I could, except that there couldn't be a war at the end. There had to be a legal battle. Mm-hmm. For the Greenlanders, I knew that I was just going to follow the Greenlanders through the history of Greenland until basically they were out. Until they were lost. Yeah. There are a few characters still alive in the book. But for every book I've had a plan. The next one that's coming out, though, I decided to do an experiment. And this one is called The Trail. And I was walking on the river trail in Monterey, and I heard a noise, and this guy behind me, who was a big, hefty guy, was sounded sort of threatening, and it kind of scared me. And it turned out there was no reason to be worried about that. But I went back home and I said, okay, I'm going to write a novel about somebody on a trail who sees somebody threatening. But I'm not going to make a plan. I'm going to write 1,000 words a day for 6 weeks, I think it was, or maybe it was 8 weeks. And I'm just going to see what happens. So the trail that I'd been on turned out to be a trail that I was trying to follow to get to the end of the novel. And that was fun.
Sounds like a whole new experience for you based on
It
your...
was,
Yeah.
and that was also fun.
Yeah.
So we'll see if anybody likes it, but I had no idea what was going to happen at
Yeah.
the end.
Yeah. Gary?
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
How's it going? How you doing? All right. Yeah, no, I agree with both of you. I think it's wonderful. Thank you, Richard, for coming up with this whole question, because I think this is a great way to kind of do the, what is it, the Uroburu thing that bites its own tail? I don't know. I can barely read myself, but Uro something, outer borough, that does that. And I so agree with Jane about the idea of finding a topic. People always think, well, I got my characters and get, some kind of domestic issue. But having a topic is awesome. And the more esoteric the topic, the better. The great Antarctic penguin novel set with only Antarctic penguins has not been written, but that could be you. And I see a hefty advance from some Antarctic publishing company. Before I start, I just want to say, I want to salute all the writers and artists who work in Key West. I don't know how the hell you do it, because I need more agita to function. Maybe you have, maybe it's bring your own agita for you, BYOA. But whenever I'm here, and maybe it's the fact that I come for a week, but I just, I'm walking around today. It's been 6 days, and I think the only thing I miss in life is my 8-month-old dachshund, long-haired dachshund named Bernie. He looks and sounds just like Bernie Sanders.
Why didn't you bring him?
Because the Hotel de Marquesa is no dogs allowed. Yeah, very sad.
We can have a rebellion.
We can have a rebellion. We can secede finally. But then I'm walking down the street, and all of a sudden, 30 dachshunds run up to me. All of a sudden, I'm on all fours being licked by these wieners, which could be the motto of Key West. And it was and I thought, is there anything this island won't do for me? Like, is there? It's just incredible. Yeah. And I thought, how do artists work here? Because you can't just, beauty is a part of what we do, but actually it's not a part of what I do at all. You guys have some beauty in your books, but anyway, I'm just so, I'm leaving tomorrow, and it's just, I just want to cry every time I fly back to my island of financial professionals.
And what is that one?
Manhattan, yeah.
Well, there's some pretty spots in Manhattan.
That's so sweet. You're such an optimist. I'm going to take you to the cloisters one day. We can all sigh over a coffee. But going back to Rick's wonderful his wonderful theme here, it's a really good question. A lot of the people I talk to who are kind of in the intersection of the humanities and technology tell me that the novel is kind of done for with later generations, that it's really... And I notice this as someone who teaches at Columbia's MFA, like assigning a 300-page novel, I know that's probably not going to be read.
Right.
I'm doing a lot of like Renata Adler's Speedboat, 150 pages. Boom. My last novel, Vera, is 250 pages. I actually had to Google, how long can a novel be? Does a novel have to be? And according to Wordsworth, 50,000 words. And my last book is 50,003. So.
Yeah.
But it's a big question of how this particular form, as opposed to poetry, short stories, etc., but how the novel will continue to live, given that everything that these giant corporations have been throwing at us is designed to reduce our attention span, to reduce our... it's funny because we're constantly looking at pictures of others on Instagram and Twitter, all these horrible things that have destroyed my own life, although please follow me at Shteyngart on all of the above. Yeah. Lots of stone crab pictures. But You know, but at the same time, the pictures you see, you know, you just see me enjoying life with my stone crabs. That's not, there's so much inner horror that you'll never get to see. But what these companies have done is they've destroyed our capacity, or are destroying the capacity of, you know, younger people to be able to you know, they think that that's it. You know, oh, there's stone crab guy. There's, you know, whatever, wonderful homemade sweater that you're wearing. You know, that's what they would focus on. But there's so much more, and what the novel allows us to do is it's the ultimate kind of technology, because despite the fact that it's ancient, it allows you to enter the consciousness of another individual, so that you can be a cab driver from Nigeria in London, or you know, a Sri Lankan fisher person. There's just, it's an endless combination of things, and we've seen so many interesting combinations on these stages. But all that will be destroyed. And once those things are destroyed, we were mentioning before about them going after poets, fascism.
Right.
This regime doesn't quite do that. They'll go after a, you know, not great comedian like Jimmy Kimmel, right? But they won't go in the way the Soviet Union did. They don't go after the poets, because the technology is already there in place to destroy even the need for people to look at what people are producing. And that's a scarier thing. They're, you know, forget about it. They're cutting out the middleman. There's like nothing left. There's no way to connect. And only connect, obviously, is what we're meant to do. So, so many optimists on this panel.
No,
I agree with you, but
I was just going to say, just to, on the upside of that, I agree with everything that you're saying. What it doesn't quite explain to me is why my daughter's bookstore in Portland, Maine, is doing so well. I don't, if what you say is true, and I have no doubt that it is, and I have no doubt that AI is only going to make it worse, and technology is only going to make it worse. And yet, during the pandemic, people read and read and read and read, and it was true. But then after the pandemic was over, but the last couple of years, her bookstore is doing well, and we're hearing that the independent bookstores are having a resurgence.
Absolutely,
So
they really are.
How do we square?
So this is the interesting stuff, and this is what I find fascinating. First of all, I bet your daughter's real good at what she does.
She's pretty good, yeah.
Her only, you know, the only issue I have is she's never invited me to her bookstore, but whatever. Probably that's just a sign of good taste.
How would you get to Maine? Would you walk?
I would walk to Maine, sure. No, I would take a shrimp boat, the way every Mainer does, or lobster boat. I don't know. Sorry, I love Maine, not making fun of it. It's the next Key West. But this has been an interesting thing, is that indie stores have been growing while everything else has been in decline. And I think it's because people really want experiences in a community. I think that's what's been missing from all this stuff. You know, all the other stores don't have that. It takes a very small store. There's one, I live half the year upstate. There's the Oblong bookstore in Rhinebeck. Wonderful. Everyone's, the whole community.
I know that store. Yeah.
You give a reading, 200 people show up, you know. So I think it's smaller communities too. That's a big part of it, which are able to function. People come in, they have a cup of coffee, they browse, they talk to their friends. You know, that's what's so important. Yes, the future, I think, of reading will be in these kinds of things, which is fine. I hate, you know, Amazon as well. So, and who owns it, et cetera. So, look, it's not all bad, but it's a question of, even in the future, what will they come in to read? You know, will it still be novels, or will it be something else? And maybe that's okay too. I don't mind doing, you know, books that talk back to you a little bit, or interactive, whatever the future holds. But at the same time, as I was saying, there is something wonderful about a writer being, you know, director, star, producer of an experience. You really have the auteur experience, and that's what novels offered for so long.
Right.
Yeah, but the other thing you have to understand is that the novel has changed over and over and over again, and that, you know, some types go away and then they come back, and then they go away and then they come back, and you just have to accept that. And what you have to take pleasure in is that you enjoy doing it. And you know, I've written so many novels, but I can't. There's some that I found a little confusing, or you know, a little, I don't know, not confusing exactly, but as if I couldn't figure them out. And others just sort of zipped through me as if they were coming to me from beyond. The weird one that did that was the Greenlanders. And when I was writing that, I knew that I had to write it in an archaic style, as if it was a translation from an Old Norse saga. And I'd read a lot of sagas, so I worked on that for the first 50 pages, and then I went back and forth, and then when I finally sort of had it in my mind how to do it, I had my first computer, and I started typing, and it just sort of swept through me and onto the page. And my editor didn't really have to correct anything. What's on the page is basically what I wrote.
Wow.
And
That's showing off. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
well, okay, if that's showing off, then I'll talk about good faith, which I scratched my head and scratched my head and scratched my head, could not figure out.
Yeah.
Or I'll talk about horse heaven, where of course I had to go to as many racehorse places as I possibly
Work,
could.
yeah, that's
And so,
fun.
everyone has been different, but the only one that ever just sort of swept through me was the Greenlanders, and I think it was because of the narrative style. But anyway, you did it. It was fun. I hope somebody else likes it. As I said the other day, you finish your novel, you hand it over, now it belongs to somebody else, and you just hope for the best.
Absolutely.
I think one thing that I can think of in terms of both of you as writers, that your books aren't apolitical in any way, but they don't, what you were talking about before, you don't have to be in complete response to everything that's happening, especially now that 800,000 things are happening before breakfast.
Right.
There's a way to allow the stuff in, but it can form the background of people's lives.
Yeah.
Even writers I admired during the Soviet Union, well, obviously not like Solzhenitsyn's Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, that's all repression. But most books had a kind of, almost like a little dance around what's happening and with the characters featured prominently. I think that's really important, because I think of some of my favorite writers, like Tolstoy, for example, right? He started out as a brilliant writer. All of his books were so full of the events of the day. War and Peace, obviously, not the Napoleonic thing, but even in Anna Karenina, all these different, you could see the advance of the railroad, quite fatally at the end there, but you could see all the different things changing. But at the same time, he was, before anything, committed to the human aspect of existence. His later life, he became essentially a polemicist of some crazy causes, and he got into nudism and veganism, one of which is wonderful, but
That's right.
I'll let you decide.
You're not going to say which one.
I'm not going to. I can't be canceled in Key West. That would be unbelievable. But, but that's exactly it. I think I sometimes see writers, and obviously not the ones on this stage, but I do see writers fall for the idea that, what you were saying before about this novel's going to change everything, God damn it. And as you were saying, yes, it doesn't really happen that much anymore, but also it often creates for lesser art. And that's, I think, something that I would offer up as an idea.
How so?
Because I think whenever, look, you can go on Twitter, I will never call it whatever that doofus calls it, but you can go on Twitter and really put together a 10-paragraph thread about your feelings about a certain aspect of what's going on, and it'll be wonderful, because as a writer, you'll be able to phrase it in a way that just some rando schmuck can't.
Right.
And I think, there is value in that. I've been, people are telling me, get off Twitter and write a book. I'm like, no, I think this is important, at Shteyngart. I think this is important because it also is a way of communicating with people who for some reason want to listen to me. But a book of that is not a good idea, or even a book massaging some of these thoughts as a novelist is not a great idea. You still want to find, as you were talking about, you want to find a character or a series of characters that you love so deeply that once you finish writing about them, you miss them. You want to be with them. They're like your invisible dachshunds, in a different latitude. So that's how I still operate, because I do have all the time in Columbia, I have kids who are great writers, but they are obsessed not just with the theme, but with the stance. There's a difference in being, interested in Greenland or in horse breeding or in farming, and being interested in the injustices of the day, which are absolutely interesting, but you can write about the injustices of the day through farming, through so many of the other things, because it's all included. It's, it's already built in.
But that's kind of an end point rather than a beginning point, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Do you feel, both of you feel, too, here we're talking about social forces that, and technology that are shaping at least part of our lives as artists. Do either of you feel, as I do sometimes, just really pissed off I just want to say, when people advocate that we write, say, shorter books, and I admit it, I've written some doorstops. Bridge of Sighs was like in manuscript 1,000 pages, or roughly like that.
Wow.
But when people give me perfectly plausible reasons for doing a smart thing, it just pisses me off. Because I want. It makes me want to say, all right, the next one's going to be 1,500 pages.
Oh.
Because I don't.
Russo's Revenge.
I don't want to be You want to be thinking about art, as we were talking about. You want to be thinking about art. The intersection of art and commerce has always been tricky, right?
Right.
But good Lord, I think a real artist, you can't be thinking about the commerce of it.
Well,
can you?
my whole life I've been saying, don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Nice.
And at least to myself.
Yeah.
But
That's great.
Well, feel free about saying that to Gary and I too tonight, if the impulse.
Don't tell me what to do.
I think for me, it was do what you want and hope for the best. I think that would be my lifetime motto.
Yeah.
In writing books and reading books and riding horses and having kids.
Yeah.
And fingers crossed, we'll see what what will happen. So.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, you were talking about publishers and editors saying, make it shorter. I remember my first book 20 years ago, right, 2002. I wrote, it was a 360-page book, and my editor said it needs another 100 or so pages.
Yeah.
Can you imagine today an editor saying that?
Yes.
It was such a different world.
You would post that on social media.
I would, yeah. Give me more words, yeah. I don't know. One thing that I still believe in is, and this is kind of a little bit of an outsider's perspective these days, is I believe books should entertain. Sorry, I have to put a question mark at the end because I'm so scared of saying this. Like, I have trouble saying this at my workshop because these kids all want to do theoretical, crazy work that I can't even begin to understand. But people say Foucault like it's an ice cream flavor. They use it as a verb. Can you Foucault that a little more? I'm like, oh, great. Lacan it up the wazoo. But, and look, it's fine. It could be a novel of ideas. Rachel Kushner writes wonderful novels of ideas. But I still want entertainment, damn it, because books entertained the crap out of me when I was a kid. They were more interesting than television back then. They were more audacious, Judy Blume, who was somewhere on this wonderful island. I was in this horrific yeshiva. I was sentenced to 8 years of Hebrew school for a crime I didn't commit, but there I was. And it was, Torah this, Talmud that, blah, blah, blah. And then we all got our copy of Forever. At least the girls had Forever. And then, the advanced boys got it. And my whole life changed. I realized I wasn't a religious guy.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking. Thank you. But you're talking about books that changed the world. Back then, they really did. I still wonder if it's young adult books today, because kids are still forced to read, and then they fall in love with certain books. Now, girls, I think, continue to read. Like, I mean, I don't know. When you do a reading, so many more women are there than men, right? But especially when it's fiction. If it's a book on the Civil War, it'll be, probably
or
even,
nonfiction.
or nonfiction. Yeah. But I just find that, I really do think that that they can change the world. Now that I thought about it, because it definitely changed mine. Yeah.
Well, some of my books I've written to entertain myself. So
all of mine books have been written for exactly
but not just to say what I wanted to say, but to amuse myself.
Yeah.
So in 2019, I had a book published called Perestroika in Paris. And it's about basically a horse, a dog, 2 rats, a pair of mallards, and a little boy and his great-grandmother who live in Paris. And I had no idea. I worked on it for a really long time. I enjoyed every single moment. And I had no idea whether my publisher wouldn't say to me, is this ridiculous? Do you mean for this to be ridiculous?
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's the books change in the sense that, well, why am I writing this? And I wrote that one just because it was fun. And I wrote Dangerous Business, which is a murder mystery that takes place in Monterey in the 1850s, because it helped me walk around Monterey and kind of imagine what it was like. And also, I wanted the two main characters are sex workers, and I wanted to talk about what that type of life would have been in those days. And that actually won a prize for historical accuracy. So which which thrilled me. And so,
well done.
I would never win a prize like that. And I write about the present day.
I think if you want to keep going as a writer, the person you have to entertain is you.
Totally.
I absolutely agree.
Totally.
I think we probably all have. We don't want to be around boring people when we're writing a book any more than we do in real life.
That's true.
You know, we just want to hang out with people that are fun, that are smart, that are witty, that are surprising. That's if you're not doing that, I don't know.
Why do this? Why do this?
For a long time, when so I've been married to my fourth husband for about 26 years, and the way I wooed him was I was writing a book called 10 Days in the Hills, which is based in Hollywood. And I would read it aloud, page by page, to him as I wrote it. And in order to woo him, I put more sex in it. It worked like there's so many aspects to art that we normally don't talk about.
I
have to say.
But we should.
So and so many of them are absolutely selfish. That's one of the things that people who don't.
It worked like a charm.
It's one of the things that people who are not artists themselves don't understand is how incredibly selfish it can be.
No, it wasn't
and almost always is.
Well, he knew more about lots and lots and lots of things than I did.
But on this subject.
Well, probably on that subject too. But it was really wonderful to read it aloud and pay attention to what you'd written, and then you could, when you're reading something aloud, you say, oh, that's wrong. I need to fix that.
Yeah.
Because you're paying attention word by word.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Let me just go off of that, because when I came out as a writer in the early aughts, writers were supposed to go and declaim before an audience for like 40 minutes, just read. Many of them sucked at it, but still people sat there, listened, tried to follow. Nowadays, as we know, doing circuits of these things, it's all in conversation. People can't even listen to 15 minutes of a writer talk.
No, that's true. Yeah.
So, in America, now, in a place like Germany, a reading is 2 hours. First, there is an actor who reads your work, an actor from the local theater. And then you read for another 30 minutes in English. And then an hour, people will ask questions that are so precise. They're like, yeah, so in page 30, your character is wearing a green sweater. But on 48, it's brown. So is this magical realism?
Yes.
And you're like, no, I made a freaking mistake, all right? I can't keep track of my goddamn sweaters. And they're like, oh, no, this is not accurate historically. But so anyway, it's quite a difference. The Germans may be the last readers on Earth at some point.
Well, thank you for
should
telling
we?
me.
Should we open
Absolutely.
the
questions? I love questions
from the audience?
Yeah.
People are scrambling around to get microphones in various places here, but since this is called The Last Word, my feeling is that some of you people should have
the
at
last
least part of the last word.
Hi, Gary, this is for you. Speaking as a professor, do you find that the future generation of novelists are going to have more of a diversity of opinions, or do you see it coalescing around certain monocultures of thought?
You know, it's very interesting because I wouldn't say it's a monoculture of thought. I mean, maybe a kind of urban, cosmopolitan, progressive standpoint, perhaps. But frankly, hasn't it always been sort of like that? What I see the monoculture is more, well, actually, going back to what Jane was saying about sex, like there's certain subjects that would motivate writers of my generation and older, of which sex in a Updikean way was, in Rothian way, or Gateskiellian way, if you will, was always a major thing. But I can't call them kids. They're in their 20s. It's a Master's of Arts programs. They're young, even not so young adults. But what I find that's missing as a subject matter is not just sex, but love. That has left the building. Almost nobody falls in love. If they do, it's already set up to be a disaster, which fine. But remember, Lady with Lapdog, Chekhov's best story, I think, ends with, this nightmare is gonna continue forever because they can't let go of each other. But here it's like, well, goodbye. And when sex does happen, it's always in these very kind of, it's very Trumpian in that it's always a kind of, exchange of goods and services. So there's always people in Brooklyn camming. I didn't even know what that term was, but they're getting naked on camera for bucks, So everything's transactional is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So everything seems very transactional. People meet because one has the dough and the other has cultural cred. And again, it's not like this stuff has just been invented in the aughts, or whatever we are in the 20s. God, it's rushing past me. But, it's sad because I have books with titles like Super Sad True Love Story, and today would just be Super Sad True Transactional Story, Yeah. and that just, I don't know, because to me, really, you write about family, you write about love, and you write about friendship. Those have always been the pillars of everything I've written about.
Yeah.
But it seems like that's all going the way of the dodo, and I don't know. And that makes for very clever and often very intellectual writing, but it doesn't make for writing I want to luxuriate in page by page.
Yeah. Other questions?
Over here. I wanted to say a couple of things. One of them is I disagree with your statement that they'll come after the poets because art in America is like really unimportant and they don't pay attention to it. No, the best art I've ever seen in my life has been in the Soviet Union and behind the Iron Curtain.
True.
It's just, it's amazingly better. But the thing is, art in America seems to be like what they call the K-shaped economy. There's a small part of it that's doing very well, but it's small. And a great part of the literary economy is not doing anything at all, especially for people in most of the average United States. And I just wondered, am I being incredibly pessimistic?
Yes.
Oh.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be. But if you look back on the history of the arts and of, the population, the people, things go up and down. You just have to go with the flow and hope for the best. That's the only thing that I think you can do.
You're not wrong. I think it's true that this, and going back to Rick's daughter's bookshop, there are groups, I think, in this K-shaped economy where that little bad part of it is kind of like, trying to raise itself up again. That's a horrible image, but you know what I mean? But at the same time, I remember I did a piece for The Atlantic recently where, this has a very Floridian valence, where I had to go on the world's largest cruise ship, the icon of the seas. 8,000 people. I went around that boat looking for people who are reading. Can you imagine? Almost nobody was reading a damn thing, not even the Holy Bible. I would have taken the Holy Bible. The only book they were reading, and there was about 7 of them, was The Real Dr. Fauci by RFK Jr. They loved that book. And I remember posting on Twitter saying, blah, 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 I'm on the world's largest ship, a Royal Caribbean ship, and Joyce Carol Oates tweeted back and said, oh, what's the library like on that ship? And I'm like, JCO, come on. Because she said, I was on the QE2 and I was giving lectures in their library. Well, the QE2 is a refined experience. This ship is America, where the average reading level is 6 years old, sixth grade.
Yeah.
Going towards 6 years old very soon.
Yeah.
So I see where your pessimism is, but I also do understand what Jane is saying about sometimes societies almost have to collapse and then reinvigorate and refigure out the fact that the presence of mind to be able to work with art, to exhibit, to experience art is so important that you can't have a civilization without it. And maybe that's when things get better, hopefully.
Hope so.
I would only add to that is that I think part of your question implies that you really hope, you really wish the world would be a more fair and just place, and you're disappointed that it isn't. To which I would say, I'm on your team. I wish that more people had good educations. I wish that more people had more money. I wish a lot of things that are contrary to what we know to be fact. But the fact that the world is not the place that we wish it to be is not necessarily a cause for despair. There is some reason to believe that, or various reasons to believe that all hope is not lost.
Yeah, agreed.
We have time for one more.
So this question is for each of you. Writing a novel requires a certain amount of discipline, and I'm just curious if you all have a daily schedule that you stick to finish your work.
I do.
Yep.
Yeah, I always write in the morning because that seems to be when I have a brain. And I usually write 1,000 to 1,500 words. Wow. And then I put them away. I try to forget about them. And then in the afternoon, when I go out for walking, which I always do.
Yeah, me too.
Stuff comes into my mind. Thoughts come into my mind. And I hope that I'll remember them. Sometimes I write them down. And then the next day I get up, get out the stimulant, and go back to work and hope for the best. Now, I can't say that 1,000 words come out or 1,500 words come out at the same every day. Sometimes I'm scratching my head. Sometimes they're kind of zipping out. But if I don't do that 6 days a week, I skip it on Sunday usually. If I don't do that 6 days a week, then I feel like I'm just twiddling my thumbs. And that's been my schedule forever. The other thing that's part of my schedule is I'll finish either all of the first draft or part of the first draft. And then I'll set it aside and go back to something else that I'm working on. And that's another way of distracting myself so that I come up with a new idea. Mm-hmm. Because my experience is that, especially if you love reading, your reading brain is sharper than your writing brain. Mm. And so if you put it away and forget about it and then come back and read it, then you think, oh, I understand that. Oh, okay, I have an idea here. Oh, I need this. And if I didn't put things away for a while, then my reading brain would be too obsessed with what I was already thinking about it. Oh. So, and that's worked pretty well for me.
How about you, Gary?
Wake up around 10. My dachshund's peed all over me by this point. Yeah. So I take him out for the poop part of it. Long breakfast. Huevos rancheros. Then around 11, a long walk. I walk 6 miles a day, and I also swim.
Excellent.
Jeez. I only walked 4.
4 miles?
Yeah.
So that's 10 between us. And
I do 3, but I'm older.
We have a great 13-mile regiment right here. Yep. I think walking is super important for a writer.
Yeah.
Lots of thoughts. I type it into my portable iTelephone or whatever.
Yep.
So that. Then around 1, I get to work. I really feel there are diminishing returns. 2-3 hours, depending on where you are. If you're in editing of a second draft, you could go as far as 4. In the beginning, maybe 2 hours. I do not do 1,500 words. 900 would be a miracle, but to each their own. Then begins, then I think I mentioned this at the last time, then I see my shrink, you know. He's got a lot of writers under his very furry wing. We sometimes meet each other in his waiting room. He's on the Upper West Side, so this is conducive to all the writers he's seen later getting together at 5 at Café Sabarsky at the Neue Galerias. There we order café mit Schlag and a strudel, and the crying begins, the weeping. What was your advance? I can't even begin. We cry, we hug. In the old days, we kissed. Now we're all married. And then the drinking begins at another bar, the Hotel Chelsea, better known as the Chelsea Hotel back in the day. Yeah. Their Duke's Martini is very famous. One other reason we cry is it's $19 these days. That's not what it was when we were children. And then at 11 p.m. we repatriate. I need at least 11 hours of sleep to look this good, obviously. And the cycle continues every day.
Since you said that, I have to interrupt and say that the only reason, possibly, that I ever got published at all was because my best friend from the Writers' Workshop went to work in publishing, and she was an associate editor, and her boss was going to psychotherapy 5 days a week.
That's what it is, yeah.
And he told her, because he was hardly ever in the office, he told her she could buy anything she wanted. But as long as she didn't spend much for it. So I sent her the first copy of Barn Blind. And because she was my best friend, she bought it. And I was always grateful for that, because when you publish something that is not very popular but actually gets published, you get to sort of tiptoe out into the literary world and see how it works.
Yeah.
Psychotherapy is the best for getting published. You know?
I would add only one thing, and I'm not sure it really pertains to the question asked here, but I'll put it out there for what it's worth. I had a writing teacher once who liked, basically for him it was 2 pages a day, double spaced, whatever that, however many words that is. But what he used to say to me was, and I have found it to be true, is that if you write 2 pages a day, and for him it was 7 days a week, and that's pretty much what it is for me too. But if you write 2 pages a day for seven days a week, at the end of a year, you will have something the size of a book. True. It won't be a book, but it'll be something the size of a book. And thinking of it in those terms, 2 pages a day, I always think of as pretty healthy, because I think you go crazy trying to think about a novel in its entirety. If you think of a novel as 2 pages a day, and you're writing something the size of a book every year, and then when you have something the size of a book and you turn it into a real book, however many years that takes, then you're really thinking about things in manageable, bite-sized pieces, and you're not driving yourself absolutely crazy every day.
Well, that's a good reason to have Joyce Carol Oates here, because she's written so many books.
Yeah.
She writes everywhere she is, like in a cab.
I would love to know what she feels about her process. She's also an avid walker.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know about her process.
So walk,
but she
write,
keeps
shrink.
that sort of stuff to herself.
Walk, write, shrink.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight.
Thank you.